Rubert Prevatt was born on May 15, 1925 in Seville, Florida, to Mabel and Wally Prevatt at their home, which just happened to be located in the middle of a tangerine grove. His father was a citrus and vegetable grower, and Rubert grew up helping the family's citrus groves along with his three brothers. As a teenager, Rubert was involved in the FFA and 4-H and was chosen as the 1942 Outstanding 4-H member in the state. Rubert, which is Swedish for Robert, paid his way through the University of Florida by working with his father farming vegetables, putting out fertilizer, picking, packing, and grading fruit, as well as selling it to customers in North Carolina from the back of a pickup truck. While at the University of Florida, he was a member of the marching band playing the baritone, and he graduated in 1948 with a BS in agriculture. He stayed on at the University of Florida to earn his master's degree in soil chemistry and was responsible for setting up and running the first state soil testing lab there from 1948 to 1951. In 1951, Rubert took a job with the Doctor Phillips Company in Orlando, working for Howard Phillips, one of the owner's sons and a graduate of Harvard University. Howard liked to experiment, and Rubert learned quickly that the job was to do what needs to be done when it has to be done. He credits his experience there as the catalyst that gave him the ability to teach throughout the rest of his career, as he learned how the packing house ran and experimented in production and fertilization practices in the nursery and groves. While in Orlando, he was instrumental in helping the state get the DPI Budwood Program started, and the Dr. Phillips Company was the third grower member in the state to join the new program. He handled all aspects of the program at Dr. Phillips, and one of the Valencia trees that he budded while there is still on the certification list. Rubert married his wife Edna in 1953, moving the following year to Cornell University so Rubert could pursue his doctorate in soil science. By 1956, Rubert was ready to move back to Florida, and he finished his doctorate in soil science in 1959 at the University of Florida. From 1959 to 1970, Rubert served as agronomist for International Minerals Corporation, IMC, and was in charge of all research and fertilizer formulations for the Southeast region. When they closed the lab in 1970, Rubert began teaching citrus culture and production at Florida Southern College in Lakeland, following the death of Professor William R. Lyle. By the spring of 1971, he was teaching 10 different citrus, soils, and horticulture classes with Professor Tom Mack. From 1970 until his retirement in 1999, Rubert became Doc to hundreds of citrus and horticulture students.
I learned quickly not to use the term dirt instead of soil. That was a bad mistake, and he would certainly correct you on that every single time.
He taught us not to be farmers. I think that's genetic, but he told us to be better farmers. And we spent a lot of our time not in the classroom, but in the grove that Florida Southern had. And he taught us to listen to the trees, put footsteps in the grove, and I think that's what makes us better farmers for being taught from him.
Dr. Prevatt was instrumental in creating a very unique citrus program at Florida Southern College. A program where he believed knowledge not only came from a textbook, but actual hands-on experience.
Dr. Prevatt really believed in experiential learning, and I think through our field trips and labs, he produced a generation of some of Florida's best production managers and citrus growers, and I think most of them would credit him with that teaching style really being a wonderful method of learning by doing.
He would take us everywhere, it seemed. Every chance he got, he would take us out into the industry to meet the leaders in the industry and have them explain to us what they were doing within their own operations. And we would even go so far as Miami, Florida, to go to the Florida State Hort Society meetings every year.
We'd go on a lot of field trips, and Doc would drive the citrus van. We had this old van that we would drive around. And we had a rule that whoever sat in the front seat could not look at Doc, because Doc would get so engaged with talking to that person that he would look at the person he was talking and not look where he was going, and he scared us to death many, many times.
Dr. Prevatt's greatest contribution to the citrus industry was his tireless efforts to train his students in all aspects of the industry. He had developed key relationships with industry leaders during his tenure, which created excellent career opportunities for those who graduated from his department.
Those experiences were just monumental and to give me exposure of how the real world operates in the Florida citrus industry.
His passion for teaching inspired, challenged, and motivated hundreds of students to invest their time and efforts in the Florida citrus industry.
Dr. Prevatt is loved by his students because every single day he woke up and he went to work, he cared about their well-being, and not just their education. He cared about them being well-rounded individuals. He invested in their lives. And that is something that touches a person so deeply you can't help but just to carry it with you the rest of your life.
He oversaw the growth of the Citrus and Horticulture Department, including a greenhouse that was funded by a former student. At one time, over 80 varieties of citrus were planted at Florida Southern College, with many of them cultivated in the greenhouse, thus creating a living lab for his students. In addition, he was instrumental in working with Professor Thomas Mack to bring the Jack Berry Senior Citrus Building to Florida Southern and obtain the Ruth Tyndall Chair Endowment legacy for the Citrus Department. Rubert's 29 years of teaching at Florida Southern also resulted in some of the first trips of growers to other citrus growing and marketing areas in the world. During the 1980s, Rubert hosted and led educational tours to Africa, Europe, Brazil, Central America, China, New Zealand, and Australia, always taking students and members of the citrus industry with him. He has been a guest professor throughout the world, including London, Egypt, and Australia, and has hosted numerous horticultural tour groups on the campus of Florida Southern College. In addition to citrus, Rubert is an acknowledged expert on roses and is a past director of the American Rose Society. Known as Mr. Rose of Lakeland, he used the roses as a teaching tool for his soils classes and has lectured on roses across the nation. He also worked closely with Lakeland Mayor Peggy Brown to have Lakeland's public spaces filled with roses. In life, one can look back and they may only be able to name a handful of people who were truly a great influence in their lives. Dr. Prevatt was one of those people who touched many lives, leaving a legacy that will be felt far into the future of the Florida citrus industry.
He was a great teacher, and I really respect him immensely.
And I think he understood that he was teaching the next generation of citrus industry leaders and took great pride in that and a great sense of responsibility.
Everybody needs somebody like that in their lives to help them get going, and I'll always be grateful to Rubert Prevatt for being that part of my life.
The fact that Dr. Prevatt not only taught us how to grow citrus, but Dr. Prevatt taught us how to be leaders in this industry. He was a true gentleman. He led by example, and I think that we have a lot to be thankful for in that regard.
He had a love for all of us that went there because probably his greatest satisfaction was the success of his students.
He didn't realize we'd be faced with HLB or canker, and he taught us how to think on our feet, and so we were always able to get through the challenges that lie ahead in our future.
He was about relationships. And yes, the time that I spent with Dr. Prevatt, the time that I spent on the internship, the time that I spent with the other students in our class as we went through, it's been priceless. I can sit here on my smartphone today and pull up 100 people in this industry that are leading, that are creating value, that are working to make the industry better. There's no question about it that the networking, that people part of it that Dr. Prevatt knew was as important as anything, if not most important.
We are honored to have Dr. Rubert W. Prevatt join the Florida Citrus Hall of Fame as our final inductee for 2014.